Hi everyone, welcome to the new season of The Teacher's Point of View. I can't believe I've got this wonderful lady, Diana Osagie, on this episode. I mean, what a privilege. I mean, I've been following you for such a long time now, Diana, and obviously you're such a, I mean, even just speaking to you just before we started recording, I mean, you've just got this amazing energy about you, and you're such a presence, and I love it. I mean, even on social media, you're such a presence. So, I mean, I won't kind of like tell your story for you. If you can just give us a quick introduction of who you are, where you've been, and kind of your journey in the last few years, that'd be amazing.
Oh, wow. Okay, it's great to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me onto the podcast. I'm really pleased to share with my fellow colleagues and those in the profession my thoughts. Oh, where did I come from? My goodness. So I was, okay, let me say it like this. I was your typical free school meals child. Before we had the language of pupil premium and all that kind of thing, we were just called free school meals kids. And you went and got your ticket from the office, then you went and handed it in and got your lunch. Okay, there was no, be inclusive. No, you knew you were free school meals because you got a ticket. Simple as that. And you had to hand it in. Everybody knew that you were free school meals as well. And I was a pupil premium child, and I grew up in South London, in Camberwell, and we were sandwiched between Brixton and Peckham. And my parents were very adamant, don't let us see you ever going into Brixton or Peckham, because those are the naughty areas, But I went to school in Peckham, and I had what I call a poverty of circumstance, but not a poverty of aspiration or of expectation. So I lived on a council estate for 20 odd years, shared a bedroom with my brother till I was 19 years old before I went off to university. And we got to a position in our family where we had just enough. Coming from poverty where we didn't have enough, to get into a stage where we had just enough, but never anything spare, never any abundance, never anything more than just enough. And I went to university, did my degree, and in my parents' eyes, I mean, they're extremely, my dad's passed away, they're very proud of me, but I didn't do what I was supposed to do because I'm Nigerian by heritage. And there are 3 careers that Nigerian children are supposed to take up in. And we know what they are, don't we? You can be a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant. That's it. I was supposed to become a doctor. I was supposed to go and do a medical degree, and I flopped my A-levels, and then I flopped them again. So that wasn't going to happen. So I went off, and my dad goes, well, you're going to do a science degree. So he chose my degree for me. That was the life that I had. My mum chose my options. My dad chose my degree. And I did a biomedical science degree in Wolverhampton. Loved it. In the final year, when I'm thinking, what am I going to do with my life? I was going to become a scientist, but scientists were not well paid. In the final year, I was reading a journal, and in the back of the journal was a teacher training course, recruiting. I literally signed up for that and got on, and it was the beginning of this phenomenal journey that I've had. And I started teaching in my first challenging urban school in Newham in East London. Loved it. The boys were tough. I mean, there's 1,500 boys in Newham. It was a tough gig, but I loved it. Went then to my first promotion, head of year, to a school in South London. That school doesn't exist anymore for good reason, because it was hell on earth. It was a portal to hell. And it was the worst 18 months of my life, not of my career, of my entire existence. This 18-month stint as a head of year in hell. It was that bad, that dangerous. Fireworks flowing through the corridor. It was kids on the roof dancing. It was ridiculous. Schools don't exist like this anymore, thank God.
Thank God.
But it was a fresh start school where the government at the time thought if we give a school a lick of paint, a new uniform and a new name, it changed into something amazing. It doesn't. Hell. But in that hell, I learnt my first taste of urban leadership. From there, I got a job in another school, and I went from head of year straight to being a deputy head. So I missed what we now call assistant head. Back then it was called senior teacher. I missed that stage. I went straight from middle into senior leadership, to deputy headship. And that was in 2001, and I was at Islington Arts and Media School. At the time, it was the second worst school in the country. 5% of children got their GCSEs. I mean, I'm laughing now because now it's phenomenal. But at the time, oh my God. The year later, it was the second most improved school in the country because we got 19% through rather than 5%. This just tells you the nonsense of percentages, right? Okay. I was deputy head. It was 10 years. I was deputy head for 5 years, Key Stage 3, then 5 years, Key Stage 4. I learnt everything I knew, ready for headship, even though I wasn't thinking of becoming a head, in those 10 years. I learned where staff with a little bit of support could turn into something phenomenal. I learned where the narrative of young people's lives, and some of them had appalling circumstances, but we were the oasis in their life that allowed them to become the young people that they were designed to be. Nobody gives birth and says, I hope this child fails. I hope they don't learn to read. I hope they don't learn to communicate. I hope they don't learn how to put a sentence together. No one says that when a child is born. But that is often the outcome of a child going to school in this country still, and it's a shame. But we were becoming an oasis that changed that narrative in young people's lives. So that's what I did for 10 years as deputy head in those two, Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4. And it was a baptism of continual fire. But again, I loved it. I thrived in it. 2010 comes and it's time for me. I've done my NPQH years ago. Lovely course. As far as I was concerned, it was a course. I wasn't going to do headship. And then I said, 2010 comes, Diana, it's time for you to become a head teacher. I didn't want to become a head. I mean, who wants that? Pressure, difficulty, perceived challenge, actual challenge. I wanted, I want to marry Idris Elba and live a life of Riley. I don't want to have no difficulty in my life. Idris Elba got married to somebody else. So that was plan B gone. And it was time for me to become a head teacher. Or what are you going to do, Diana? You've got to this stage. And I was blessed to be appointed the head teacher when my head teacher retired. And literally the relationships I thought I had with staff, we'd been together for a long time, changed overnight. When I was deputy, I was a bit of the bulldog, I'd stomp about and make things happen, pastoral, right? And, if you could hear my footsteps coming and you'd hear all the kids run, Osagie's coming, and all run off. So I was a bit of I was the enforcer, put it that way. I was the enforcer. But when you're the head teacher, that's not the role. You've got to take on a new persona. You've got to take on you're walking in a new office. Oh, the staff weren't having it. They wanted me to be the enforcer anymore, but just to be a bigger version of the enforcer they knew. They didn't want me to start thinking. They didn't want me to start strategizing. They wanted me to not forget vision, just enforce the law.
Yeah.
So that was difficult. That first year was horrible, actually. It was horrendous. It was tough, but I got through it. And I did headship for 6 years, and we changed a lot of things, and the vision was in place, and the way we built systems that last, not systems based on my personality or someone else's personality, but based on truth and based on wisdom and based on what can be implemented and embedded so that young people's lives are secure in our hands. And in 6 years, I'm thinking, you know what? We didn't have a sixth form. Diana, what are you going to do now? Because come on, you've done this once, year 7 to 11, you're starting new year 7s. And if you're not careful, you start to do things by rote, by automation. You've done it before, done it year in, year in, year in. It's now year 6. And I don't want ever an organisation that I am leading to have me doing it by automation. That's not fair on them, and it's boring for me. So I said to my governors, I'm going to leave. Oh, well, that went down like a bucket of sick. What do you mean? What have we done? It's a good thing. The school's in a great place. Systems are in place. Recruit my successor. If you don't recruit on season 1, I'll stay until you do. I'm not going to just walk out on you, but don't not recruit on purpose. Recruit my successor. They did. And I left. And that's when I set up Courageous Leadership in 2010, my first company. And I specialize in coaching heads and deputies who are in challenging schools. So if you're the head of a phenomenal school, it's all going well, you don't need me.
Yeah.
You need me when it's challenging, when it's dark, when it's difficult, when you've got to make those changes that people don't want to do. That's when you call me. So enforcer, but in a different way, if you like. And then latterly, just during the second lockdown, which was April or whatever it was, I set up the Academy of Women's Leadership. And I did that with 13 other women who are successful female leaders, because there are things that women need to know in order to thrive in leadership space. So the Academy exists for women who are doing leadership. You're already there, you're doing it, you're appointed, but inside, you don't feel like you belong. You don't feel like you're any good. You don't feel like you're doing well. And the Academy exists to smash the inner glass ceiling that women walk around with during their leadership journey. So that's a new venture that's very exciting. And yeah, I've written a book, Courageous Leadership, and I'm going to write another one in April called Thrive. And so I'm loving it, but I'm missing the chalk face. I think I want to go back. So I'm doing an executive headship right now, 2 days a week, just supporting a school that needs me. But I'm thinking of, I might just go back into the rough waters and see what it's like once again.
Get your hands dirty again.
Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, obviously, what a journey that you've had. And I remember when I started in education recruitment and IAMS, what it used to be called, right?
Yes.
I remember it was in a bit of a difficult spot, wasn't it? And I remember kind of trying to approach you and you just weren't having any of it. But we won't go into that. But
that sounds like me.
No, I'm only joking. I mean, I was a very new recruiter back then anyway, so I probably wouldn't have done you justice. But ultimately, I know obviously what a journey that school's been on. And I mean, what do you think you had to kind of implement because obviously going from 5% to 17%, oh my God, I mean, that's still pretty low compared to other schools in London. Progress, isn't it, in some respects? But I mean, what do you think you had to do to kind of give these kids a chance? Because ultimately, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, yes, we did. We went from 5 to 19%. Don't forget the little 2 is very important.
Apologies.
And then, by the time I left, we were on. By the time I left, things had changed in terms of accountability, and so we were on plus 0.34 progress 8 by the time I left my headship. But I think what leaders have to do, and this is a must. You have to build systems that are strong. And that takes a certain kind of intellect. You've got to be well read. You've got to know your stuff. Yeah. It takes a hell of a lot of courage, because people are very comfortable in systems that work for them. Yeah. This system supports my lifestyle or the way I want to teach or what I like to do. And so that's what I'm going to do. And then you come along as head teacher or deputy head and say, no, here is a new system for teaching and learning. Like, we don't want that system, because that system exposes us. That system makes me work in a way that makes me have to do reading and stuff. I don't want that system. I like this system where I can just bring up my old PowerPoints and just teach them year in, year out, year in, year out. I like that system. It works. So as a leader, 1, check the quality of your systems, because you live or die by them. The system shouldn't be based on your personality, your charisma. What you know solely is a system that works for the school or the organization at large. I always teach this to people. It's called MIC, M-I-C. When you're looking to audit the quality of something with your teams, don't do this on your own. Don't do leadership on your own. That's a nonsense. That's megalomania, not leadership. With your teams, you MIC. M, what shall we maintain in this system, in this approach, in this way of working? Because it works. It meets expectation. M, maintain. I, what should we improve? It's okay, it's not broke, but it could be better, and we know it. We tweak, we amend, we improve. C, what shall we change? It doesn't work. It's rubbish. It's no good. We're not going to tweak it. We're going to get rid of it. We're going to change it altogether. When you MIC your systems, the ones that are in place, you maintain the value that is there. And so therefore you're recognizing people's hard work over the years, because people have been there working with that. Maintain the value, but you don't maintain the mediocrity. And that's what you must do as a leader. Say a complete no to mediocrity and be comfortable in the silence that follows the word no. It's not no, but, explanation. It's no, full stop. Because the outcomes of mediocrity are shown up in young people's lives long after we finish teaching. Pupil premium children becoming pupil premium adults, becoming pupil premium grandparents, and then dying. That cycle not breaking. What we do is crucial. When you see it like that, you don't accept mediocrity in your systems, but you build systems that are supportive. Of course, you're human first, a leader second. Remember the importance of family, love, compassion, and grace. So you build systems that are supportive, that are developmental, but they are strong. They have good accountability running through them, and they are clear. I can walk into your school, you explain a system to me, I can see it working, I can see its impact. It's not a hidden smoke and mirrors thing going on here. When a system is clear, people can align with it. People can implement it. When it's not clear, when there are caveats, when there is room for maneuver, you get variation. That's fine when everyone's a fantastic teacher, because the variation is just wonderful. But it's not fine when you've got people who can't teach, people who won't teach, people who don't want to teach. That kind of variation, the consequence of that, young people pay the consequence in their life, not in our life. So leadership, do you have to be strong? Yeah. But you must be human, of course.
Of course. I mean, you're absolutely right. You're playing with kids' lives at the end of the day, aren't you? I mean, it's always about setting these kids up for life after school. And it's always a bit of a difficult one because, you talk about kind of teachers being in the system that don't want to be teachers and that don't want to teach and they don't want variation. They're not good teachers. I mean, A, why are they there? B, why are we employing them? And C, like, how does that affect those teachers that are capable, that want to kind of explore those variations in terms of getting the best out of their children? I mean, because some of those teachers feel like they're restricted and their hands are tied because they want to be able to push the boundaries of their kids. So how does that affect them mentally?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I remember when I was teaching this boys' school in Newham. It was a boys' Catholic school. Many of the teachers were white male Catholics, so it had this complete culture about it. And there was me, tall black female from South London. It was strange, right? And there was one teacher. He'd been there since year dot. He sat on the acorn and waited for it to grow into an oak tree. And he was sat I will never forget this. He was sat in the corner of the staff room, lunchtime, and he was counting 1, 2, just counting, but out loud. So we were watching. What's he doing? Me, Bolshe and QT, goes up to him. So what are you doing? He's counting the years to his retirement. He's only 40 something. He's counting. He's not moving. He's got 20. He's counting off the years. And I was like, wow, fine. Anyway, this teacher, his lessons were always a 4, graded of whatever number you call it. it was always poor, always. He'd been there for how many years, but his lessons were always dry, boring, dull. The same PowerPoint got wheeled out for that topic since 1911. That's how he taught. If you don't like it, move on. He ruled by fear in his class. Fear, absolute palpable fear. It wasn't unusual for year sevens to wet themselves in his class. It wasn't unusual. He prided himself on how many kids would get to wet themselves or make them cry in the first term of their school life. I never understood why he was a teacher, because clearly he didn't like children and he didn't enjoy at all the profession. But more than that, I never understood why the leadership allowed him to stay. And that I took as a lesson for myself, that if clearly this profession is not for you, clearly, right? Let me help you find success elsewhere. Because the result of year sevens weeing themselves in his lessons in history turn them off history forever. You know?
Yeah.
It's not fair on the young people. He was so bored, he'd sit every lunchtime and count the years to his retirement. It wasn't fair for anyone. I never understood why leadership permitted that level of utter mediocrity in the school.
And what does that mean for the other teachers? Because ultimately, you need him to do his job, right? But those teachers...
You need him to do his jobs. What does it mean? It means that you cover for him, doesn't it? Because the department's got to get the results, right?
Yeah.
So it means that other people take on the exam groups, and put my hands up in quotations here, because you're not going to give it to teacher B, because you know the exam groups will flop. So everyone else will take on that burden. It means that you give him set 5, set 7. That's not fair on those poor kids in set 5 or set 7, because they're going to get a raw deal for their GCSE or for their key stage 3 experience. It means that you make excuses for his performance as other teachers in his department. It means that you have to condone rubbish. You have to align yourself with mediocrity, because you're in the same department, you're on the same team. That is unfair of leaders to ask teachers to align themselves with that kind of performance, where it's not, I can't do it. If I can't do it, train me, support me, I'll get better. It's I won't do it. I won't change. I won't collaborate. I won't be a team player. That's not allowed. If this had been a bank, if we'd been Sainsbury's, he would have been dismissed. Dismissed. But in the public sector, sometimes in teaching, we permit it.
Why?
I don't know why. Why? Because even though he was dreadful, he was influential. Because he'd been there so long, he was experienced. He was influential. He had the ability to make difficulty in waves. So you had a silent, I'm sure this is how, now I know, because I've been leading a long time now, there was a silent contract between him and leadership. Leave me alone and I'll keep quiet. That silent undercurrent contract. We have it in the classroom. Leave Johnny in the corner alone and he won't mess up the lesson. Don't ask him any questions. Don't God, don't ask him to come to the board and write anything on the board. Just leave him alone and he won't disrupt your lesson. A silent contract. Those silent contracts kill leadership credibility. Because teachers are watching. How come Mr. So-and-so doesn't have to come to parents' evening again? Because he's got, I don't know, another earache. How many ears this man got? Every parents' evening, every years 1 to 5 or 7 to 11, he's got an earache. He's got 5 ears, an earache every time. How come it's allowed? You set up an acceptance of a silent contract, and that is inherently unfair. And one thing teachers hate is unfairness.
Of course. Let's talk about this unfairness then, right? I mean, we talk, we spoke very briefly, but just before the podcast, but ultimately there is this level of unfairness in terms of deprivation in those kids that are from deprived areas, especially in like around the UK, but let's say London, because I know it a little bit more familiar and you're a bit more familiar with London. So we've got really deprived areas like the Peckhams, like the parts of East London, parts of Newham that are very, very deprived and they've got no money behind them. So there's a high level of free meals, maybe the one hot meal that they get in a day is in school. So I mean, like, it's kind of our job as your job as educators is to make sure that every child has a chance to succeed, especially if you're a head teacher of a school. Now, like one child being born in a certain area and going to an outstanding school that is his local school, then he's got a friend that lives down the road who isn't in that catchment area of that school, has to go to a special measure school. I mean, where is there fairness in that, and what kind of needs to change in that respect?
There isn't fairness in that. There isn't. There's no sugarcoating that. The way we have the system in this country has unfairness almost built in. And it is perpetuated by schools I say refusing because I've experienced it as head. Schools refusing to collaborate and support the crap school down the road, right? Parents then voting with their feet. You know, I'd rather send my child 15 miles down the road, you know, on a tube and a bus than go to the local school around the corner. And it isn't fair. It isn't fair. But things like, I don't know if you remember, you might be too young to remember this. London Challenge was a massive initiative where the government of the day put millions behind schools in London, from secondary through primary, special, everything. And expertise, training, resourcing for a long period, for years. Not just throw money at it, but they try to throw money at it intelligently. It made such a difference. And that kind of regeneration, if you like, putting your money where your mouth is as a government, backing the local leadership in Newham, Camden, Islington, you know, Merseyside, or wherever across the country, and saying to heads, CEOs of MAT, we trust you to get it right. We're going to hold you accountable. Of course we are. But we trust you to get it right. But the narrative in this country doesn't support what we're trying to do. Here's what we're trying to do. Build phenomenal schools to serve our local population. Here's what we do. We use a national political narrative to undermine our own profession. So politicians don't speak with regard and reverence for the teacher that the way they should do. And I'll say that out loud. They don't. They don't speak about the profession with reverence, and they should. They would never dream of speaking about nurses the way they speak about teachers. Nurses are held in high regard as wonderful angels, and they are. Teachers are not held with high regard. Every time the exam results come out in the summer, GCSEs are getting easier. How did that happen? Oh, God forbid teachers are doing well. Yeah, God forbid we're actually good at our job. Yeah? I mean, I'm not even going to get into the nonsense that the government have made of educational agendas during this pandemic, because we'll be here all day and this podcast will catch fire if I started. But honestly, the narrative that we have in this country around teachers, what we do and how we do it, is not even respectful sometimes from our government and from our MPs. And I resent that. I resent that. They're only in position because they had good teaching. So we need to take that narrative back.
And how are we going to do that?
I won't engage with people who don't speak respectfully of the profession. I'm not saying pander to the parts of the profession that are mediocre. Pull it up, call it out. But you be respectful of the people who are in the classroom, who are leading those classrooms, who are leading those organizations, who are at the pillar at the center of society. Without us, society crumbles. They have to know that. Without us, there aren't any doctors, lawyers, and accountants. We begin, we start the foundation of society. So they need to reverence what we do. When that changes, we have to take that narrative and start changing it ourselves. Because sometimes, I mean, I'm on Twitter and I see how teachers talk to each other, how leaders pull each other down. It's ridiculous, it's insulting, and it's disrespectful. So we have a job to change the narrative of our profession and ensure that other people understand the value of our profession. Once that changes, people invest in what looks, feels, and sounds good. That's just the way of the world, right?
Absolutely.
It is. So let us get a hold of our narrative ourselves. Refuse to engage in those foolish narratives with the government, who sometimes are not. I wonder if they're on planet Narnia. I really do. Where do you get that from? And understand the importance of our profession.
Absolutely. I mean, let's face it, politicians, the education secretary has never been in their school and taught. So, I mean, he's bringing out policies. And I mean, there is this big big talk about they listen to the people within education. But let's face it, I mean, I've spoken to so many head teachers and they're like, where the hell did they get that information from? Because that's not how we feel, you know, and it's crazy. So, I mean, how do we bring that narrative back? I mean, a lot of people say, well, politicians, well, I say this personally, but education shouldn't be run by politicians. It should be a complete separate entity run by educators. And I don't know how exactly, but maybe a diverse range of head teachers from across the country maybe need to be sitting around a round table and making decisions and collaborating, or we need to collaborate as a whole as a profession, opposed to people that have never been in a classroom making the policies and then trying to implement things without kind of actually having informed sort of views.
Yeah, it's not. First of all, it's not a quick fix. I mean, this will take, you know, a decade or so to go. But one of the things that needs to happen, for example, education is so crucial. I wouldn't dream of telling the banking sector how to run their house. I use banking. It's an integral part of my life. I have no clue how banking works. The fact that I use banking doesn't make me an expert in banking. The fact that he or she went to school does not make them. I'm laughing because it's actually rubbish, isn't it? Doesn't make them an expert in education, right? So the fact that you read a book doesn't mean it should be on the curriculum, Michael Gove. Let me just say that one out loud. Okay. So, yes, they need to take advice from a wider, more diverse cross-section of educational leadership in this nation. Simple as that. That takes courage. They have to admit they've got it wrong in the past. I don't think politicians really do that kind of thing, do they? Admit they've got things wrong.
They pretend
and make changes.
They pretend
yeah. They pretend it didn't happen, or they're moving swiftly on, that kind of thing. And then I think there has to be a recognition of the limitations that politicians have.
Yeah.
Yeah. You cannot rule the whole educational landscape from an office in Whitehall. That's silly. Come on. You've got to set trends, set an expectation, and leave us alone to meet the expectation. So that means you can't chop and change every 2 years, every 3 years, every 4 years with a new government. Because it takes not just time, but things that are worth doing well take time. So you've set the expectation for reading or for phonics or for STEM in the curriculum, then let us run with that and let there be a decade of that being embedded into our schools so it becomes part of the narrative, not another initiative. It's not, you know what, I have a level of sympathy because the man's a politician. These guys, the women, they're politicians. They're not educators. Mm-hmm. So we're asking them to lead a field that they're not actually part of. Mm. So in a way, it doesn't make sense what we're asking them to do. Right now, it happens to be is Gavin Williamson, isn't it? Poor bloke. I mean, honestly, he's got himself into such a pickle because he's never run a school. Yeah. He's never taught physics, period 6 on a Friday afternoon to set 5. I have. He's never taught phonics to young people who don't speak their own language very well, let alone speak English. So when you have zero experience of what you are trying to lead, you're putting yourself in a difficult position. I'm not saying that the State Secretary for State of Education has to be a head teacher or former head, but it would help. It would help.
Maybe you should.
It would help if they understood. People said, "Daddy should do politics." If I were in politics, I'd get voted out quick because I'd be radical. I wouldn't be radical. You know what I'd be? I would do what is necessary to get the job done, not what is necessary to get me voted in again next time. So that's why I wouldn't last, because what I would do would benefit the nation immeasurably, but it wouldn't benefit my political career. But I wouldn't be afraid to have those conversations with people that I don't get on with, don't like them, they don't like me. But hey, we have to collaborate. We have to talk to each other and then to act. Just talking, committee after committee after, oh, grief, is nowhere near enough. Talk, think, plan, collaborate, and then guess what? You've got to do, implement. And the doing and the implement, I have to trust the profession to do that. Accountability measures, of course, but trust and revere those who have spent their lives studying, leading, and being in the education sector.
Absolutely. I mean, because working collaboratively is kind of the key phrase sort of this year in some respects, and in some respects it's what I'm trying to do with this podcast. So, I mean, as a whole, as a teaching profession, what do you think we need to do to come together and kind of do what's best for our kids? Because ultimately that's the aim, isn't it?
I think that's the word "come together" is it, isn't it? It's there is strength in collective knowledge. There is strength in working together with an agreed aim and an agreed goal. That's more than just Mat A has 5 schools and Mat B has 17 schools. So they're working together in 17, they're working together as 5. I'm talking about that collective narrative that we say, you might be too young for this, every child matters. Do you remember that agenda? Back then it was a thing, every child matters. Every school matters. Every community matters. So if you are the outstanding school, good for you. You've done well. I salute you. I applaud you, because getting to outstanding is not easy. Good for you. Now hold the door open for other schools to get to outstanding as well. Don't be the sole outstanding school in the neighborhood. Share and collaborate intentionally, so all schools are able to mimic, copy, learn from, talk to, collaborate with you. Be explicit in that. Simple things. You've got a great school business manager. You know, that woman, she's on fire. She knows how to save money when there ain't no money and all the rest of it. Procure together with every school in the borough, so you all buy paper from the same supplier and you get a phenomenal discount across 15, 20 schools. So the school that's got no money gets a much better deal because they're working in collaboration with 38 primaries in the borough. Come on now, we can do this. You don't need a politician to tell you to do that.
Yeah.
You just need to be courageous and say, listen, all 38 primaries, we're going to buy paint and pencils from that shop over there. Between us, we get a phenomenal discount. We all benefit. That's more than just a mat working within the mat. If every single mat in the north of England chose one supplier for paper, imagine the discount every school could enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
You see? So when I talk about collaboration, I'm not just saying, well, why don't you come to our Inset Day on Zoom? That's the beginning. Think about those deep ways where you can hold a school that is struggling, you can hold them up.
Yeah.
A school that is doing well, you can celebrate and salute them as they're doing well. Because at the end of the day, our young people benefit when we all do well.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not right for one child to be, just because of where he's born, to go to an outstanding school, and then his friend down the road goes to a special measures school because he lives down the road, and it down to location, is it? I mean, I genuinely believe that every child has a right to succeed. And by having, in some respects, I mean, I know you believe in holding people accountable, and absolutely you should, because it's these kids' futures that we're talking about here. But I mean, these league tables, in some respects, kind of, that if you've got a school that's doing really well, I mean, they want to put it on their website. They want to like showcase that they're at the best school. They want people to work there. They want the best teachers. They want the students to come there, you know. And it's like, but what about the rest of the schools? Just because just because they're not a part of your trust, so are you not going to help them? You know. And I mean, genuinely, I think if like boroughs were to hold each other accountable, schools in the boroughs were to hold each other accountable, would that be more effective?
Well, it is. I mean, there is. I'm trying to think. I think it was Askell a couple of years back. They had the theme for the year was about that self accountability, and holding your own narrative. Absolutely. I think I was fortunate to be head teacher in a small borough. I was in Islington. There were 14 secondary schools, and a simple example of this. There used to be this horrible 2 nights a year where you had to go to the town hall, set up your stall, and then all the year 6 and year 5 parents would come round and have a look at your school stall, right? And when we were the crap school in the borough, right, as well as in the nation, but worst school in the borough as well, it was a horrible 2 nights, awful, because they wouldn't even take my leaflet from me. And I used to make my year 7s run after their parents and stick the leaflet in their bag and stuff like this. And the other schools would be, not laughing, not sniggering, but not far off. Yeah. Mm. So, I mean, we then made a pact. Literally, we made a pact between the 14 heads. That was when I was deputy, so I didn't really have the power to change that too much. But when I became head, I had the influence. And I was like, we were able to make a pact, and we said to each other, listen, we won't denigrate each other's schools. Yeah. I won't say that school's worse than that school, that school's worse than that school. We won't do that. We won't. If a child leaves your school, they don't have an automatic place to come to my school. I will call you and say, child X has rocked up from your school wanting to leave. I'm sending them back to you so you can deal with the situation. Things like that. We had unspoken agreements. If a member of staff wanted to leave school X and rocked up for interview at my school, I would call the head teacher and say, listen, your head of maths has just rocked up to my school for my vacancy. Do you know what I mean? Because head of maths was like, unicorn tears. You can't get it for love nor money. So we worked together to not undermine each other. Was it perfect? No, but it was good. Mm. It was good. There was genuine respect between each head teacher for the work they were doing in their respective schools. Yeah. Multiply that into formal ways of working between boroughs. You can change that part of London. You can change that part of England. Absolutely. Yeah. It takes courage, because what you're saying is, I'm not better than you, school down the road, whether I've got this label on my school or this position in the league table or not. I'm not better. I'm at a different place in the journey. Yeah. That's where I am. And believe you me, especially in London, where social circumstances can suddenly erupt And a school's fortunes can change on a sixpence. It takes one negative social circumstance, and parents vote with their feet, and the kids have gone. You haven't got anyone coming for year 7 next year because of what happened in year 13 last year. So when things can be that precarious, you need your local schools to say to each other, we reverence what you are doing in your school enough to not undermine you when things go bad for you. Mm. That, to me, is part of genuine collaboration.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's a very simple. What we're talking about here is a revolution in education in the UK. In some respects, it's very similar to what Finland have done in terms of their education model. Because, like, if you go to Helsinki, every single school, they believe that if their child went to the school down the road, or whether they went to their school, they will receive the same quality of education because they have complete faith with every other school in the area. And it's phenomenal because if what the Department for Education, their version, do is they'll go into the school, say, look, this is what you need to improve on. And ultimately, what we can do is we can bring somebody from the school down the road who are doing really well at this, and they'll come in and they'll help you implement these strategies. But they don't get that label of like being a rubbish school in some respects, and the parents not going to send them there. What they do is they work collaboratively and move education forward for everyone in that area. But it's very different to schools that may be in a different part of Finland, because they understand that there's going to be like differences in terms of culture. So it's about making sure that they are very much adapting to their children in the different parts of Finland. I mean, is that something that we need to kind of bring over to the UK?
It's not something that you can transport over, because you have to remember Finland as a nation has a different culture and reverence and respect for their profession of teaching. Mm-hmm. So that's what I was saying to you before about here, the narrative around our profession is different. Mm. And until that narrative and that culture changes, you can't import great practice from Finland or great practice from South Korea or any other nation, because our culture here is different. Mm. Some people, I mean, to me, it's just anathema, but some people do not value education at all. Mm. Just don't. I left school when I was 12 and I'm all right. I've heard it so many times. Yeah? I left school before I was born. Right? I've heard it many times. So for some people, education is a waste of time. For other people, it's everything. So we've got this massive spectrum. Then you've got politicians using the profession as some sort of football, kicking it from left to right, interfering, meddling, not helping, meddling. Then you've got other politicians who genuinely care, who genuinely want to be helpful, who genuinely are putting things forward that would be useful. We haven't got the cultural infrastructure right. Even now, as old as we are as a country, where education can flourish for every child. We've got it right for children who are not disadvantaged, for children from affluent backgrounds. That narrative for those families, for those children, it works. But we haven't got it right yet. The cultural template is not yet anywhere near where it needs to be. So every child can flourish in their local school. We just haven't got that cultural template right yet. That takes, for want of a better word, a cultural revolution before you can have an educational revolution. Culture is where everything sits. You build upon the culture that you have as a nation. And where it is still acceptable for some schools to be underfunded in this day and age, and they have to raise funds themselves, the cultural template is not right. But where it's acceptable that other schools have got a surplus of $1 million plus, the cultural template is not right.
Yeah.
You see, so what we have is a system that allows these injustices to flourish. And you are only as good as your system.
Yeah. So in terms of obviously making improvements, then I mean, obviously your whole ideology is based around MIC, right? And like in terms of obviously measuring what you're doing well, what we're doing well, what we need to improve on, and I'm so sorry, I forgot what C stood for, but ultimately, like
maintain, improve, and change.
Perfect. And then so what if we had to kind of use that on the education system in the UK? I mean, what do you think we're doing well? What do you think we need to improve on, and what are the changes we need to make?
Oh, that's a good question. What are we doing well? We are doing a lot well. I'm struggling to answer the question because there's a lot that's going right. And because of pandemic and because of the negative narrative with pandemic or not, it's hard to remember what's going right. So let me say this. We train our teachers very well. We've got some CPD right. We train our leaders very well. We have resourced schools now, for the most part, well. I mean, honestly, when I was at school in Peckham, I went to school on Peckham Road, Oliver Goldsmith School. Outside toilets, normal. Toilets with no lock on. So you have to take a friend to hold the door with their foot so you could go and have a wee. I mean, this is what school was like. Food that was inedible, right? School resources, sharing a book between 3 children was normal.
Yeah.
We have come a long way. Some schools now are state-of-the-art institutions with swimming pools and running tracks and IWB and all this kind of technology. I still like chalk and talk myself, but hey, I'm old. All these things, technology, we have embraced the newness of resource and technology for the most part across schools. What do we do well? I'm telling you now, for some young people whose circumstances just, so bad, we look after our children well. We do. For the most part, schools provide a safe, warm, intellectual space for young people. And you can send your child to school in England and they will be safe. They will be educated and they will come back to you having had a good day. What do we need to improve? Some schools need to improve the expectation they hold of the young people they serve. That is the beginning of improving your outcomes. If you don't think that they can do better than that, then why would they do better than that, whatever that is in your school? So having expectations that are through the roof allows young people to jump high. Because when you have those kind of expectations, you then expect teaching to be different. You expect leadership to be different. You expect the curriculum to be different because you have high expectations of what the young people can do. But frankly, if you don't have high expectations of the young people that you are serving, why would you change the curriculum until someone tells you to? Why would you? You don't have expectations of it. It works, ain't broke, use it. Yeah? Why would you push forward the frontiers of innovation if unless someone tells you to, if your expectations are low? So some school leaders need to change their expectation. And the final thing I would say is this. When you have diversity around your leadership table, you have a strategic advantage. Some schools need to embrace diversity more than Black History Month, World Women's Day, that kind of stuff. Has its place. I'm not saying don't do it, but it has its place. But that's not diversity, that's just Black History Month. When your leadership team is diverse, middle leadership, senior leadership, you have people from diverse backgrounds in terms of ethnicity, in terms of outlook, in terms of experience, in terms of gender, in terms of disability, in terms of sexuality, in terms of religion. When you have diversity, you have advantage because you're able to see the whole picture. Then you can plan for greatness.
Yeah.
But when it's you and your mate, and all your mates look like you, think like you've been where you've been, no one's been done anything different apart from what you guys have had, how could you possibly plan for greatness when you stay small in your mind and in those people who talk to and influence your mind as a leader? So when governors get the courage to appoint from diverse backgrounds head teachers, when head teachers have the courage to appoint diverse leaders in their schools, we will see change unprecedented in our schools. But what I'm saying to you, the cultural template has to change first.
Yeah.
So that it's culturally normal to have diverse leadership in terms of ethnicity, in terms of gender, in terms of outlook and of background around every leadership table in the country. We wouldn't be talking about Finland or South Korea or Japan. We would be talking about England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales as being at the top.
Yeah.
Because we would surpass them,
yeah,
if we got these things right.
Absolutely. I completely...
Am I a bit deep for you? Am I a bit heavy?
No, I love it. I love it, to be honest with you. I mean, I think education is a phenomenon and it's forever evolving, isn't it? I mean, like as people that encourage learning, I mean, I think one big problem that some head teachers have is that they don't want to learn themselves, you know, and naturally, I think the statistics show, I think there was an article from Institute of Education and you talk about the kind of lack of diversity in senior leadership teams around the UK. And I think I was speaking to my friend about this, and I think his argument is, but they're not just going to pick a coloured person just because they're coloured, right? They need to be the best person for the job. But I think sometimes, I think the big problem is you naturally gravitate towards people that are similar to you, you know? And by doing so, you kind of are basing it on like preference opposed to the people that are right for the job. You know, and it can kind of argument can kind of work both ways, can't it? But ultimately, like leaders need to be a bit more courageous, I think. And like I know that's kind of your main philosophy, but they need to be
my thing, isn't it?
but they need to be more courageous. And ultimately, it's about these children, isn't it? Do they need to be more courageous to find out what's going to be best for their kids? Because at the moment, we're using a system in some respects. I know you've said it's come a long way, but there's a lot of elements that are still very dated in terms of Victorian times. And some educators in the profession would argue that what we're doing is creating factorized like students. I mean, you're putting them through a system that is constantly like giving the same results. And what I mean by that is those kids that are very academically smart, they are naturally going to go on to do well in the current education system, the way it is in terms of the curriculum. But those kids that, like myself, maybe that weren't so good at exams, I wasn't thick by any means. Do you know what I mean? But I left school thinking maybe education isn't for me. I wanted to go out and work. But is that the system letting me down? Because there's many friends that I have that are similar, and I've spoken to many kids that would naturally not feel good at not feel that they're good at exams, and they will leave school thinking I'm not going to have a chance in life. But what they're good at is interpersonal skills, those presentation skills, those like they've got confidence, which isn't necessarily measured in an exam. Do we need to make more of an effort to kind of make sure that we are giving these kids a chance as well?
There's two things. I mean, first of all, I'll just go back and say that we don't really use the word coloured anymore. That comes from so it's cool to say black now, right? Or although the term that I learned from Rosemary Campbell MBE is a global majority, because 80% of the people on this planet come from Black, Asian or indigenous populations. But however, in terms of vocational education and in terms of young people for whom straight up academia is not their way, before we start having T levels and BTECs and all that kind of thing, it's this again, it goes back to culture. When we do not have parity of esteem between straight up academia and vocational, there's no point having loads of vocational courses available because people don't value them the same.
I agree.
The culture needs to change.
Yeah.
When you get the cultural template right, then you can build systems of vocational pathways or mixed blended path between academia. And you can even get away with, you can dispose of the terms academia and vocation, just call it education.
Yeah.
But you've got to have parity of esteem. Now let me just give you this example. When you apply for a job, it will ask you on the application form, what university did you attend? Why does it ask you that? What does it matter if you went to Greenwich, or if you went to Oxford, or if you went to Strathclyde? What does it matter? I got a 2-2 in biomedical science. That's all you need to know.
Mm.
The cultural template is set up. We want to know where you went. What school did you go to? What does it matter? I went to Bognor Regis Comprehensive School. I went to Brighton. Doesn't matter. What can you do? Should be the question on the application form. What have you done? What are you qualified to do? What would you like to do? The cultural template is not yet set. When we get that right, you can bring to me, or as the recruiter for the job, I can do this and that and the other, and I've got these qualifications, and I am like this as a person. Do you want me or not? I mean, it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. When you strip away the barriers that we put in that
Absolutely.
underpin our own biases. Because what happens when you open an application form? Oh, they went to Oxford. And the ooh comes into your voice. Somehow, in your mind, that means they're somehow better or brighter or nicer or whiter. I don't know. But there's an ooh in your voice when you see Oxford on the application form. And that ooh is not there when you see Wolverhampton Polytechnic, where I went.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously I've been in education recruitment for a long time, and sometimes, because I speak to these candidates, and what schools will see is the CV, right? So I genuinely, there's times where I have absolutely believed in this graduate, and I remember this so clearly. There was 2 maths graduates that I put forward to a role, and one was a Russell Group University graduate, and one was I think it might have been Greenwich, actually, I don't know, but it was a standard university in comparison, right? And I categorically remember telling the school, look, even though this person's from a Russell Group University, this graduate from this mediocre university, he's got so much more about him. He's got personality, he's enthusiastic, he really wants to make a difference to kids. Whereas the Russell Group graduate, I feel like you would have to really kind of install that into him. And you know who they ended up picking? Of course you do. Like they went for the Russell Group graduate, and guess what? He didn't get the job, right? And they didn't even see the other one. So I mean, ultimately, you're absolutely right. There are these barriers, and we focus so much on academia and the high and kind of like where somebody's gone or kind of what education that they've got. But in terms of, if I'm an employer, and I've spoken to many employers that are very similar, they don't look at what GCSE grades someone's got. What I want to see is, I want to see a diamond in the rough, so to speak. I want to know that someone's got personality, they've got interpersonal skills, they've got confidence, they can present, like they can pick up the phone and they can call someone with initiative. They've got grit, they've got hard work. I mean, what GCSEs don't tell me that? You know, I mean, do we need to bring something that can actually measure how those skills are on an individual when they leave school?
I mean, it's difficult because GCSEs don't tell you that, but we do need, I think, some sort of national system that we can say, okay, at the end of being 16 years old, you should have attained enough that you can pass 7 to 8 GCSEs or vocational courses or whatever equivalents. We've got to have some benchmark, otherwise we have anarchy.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah. Of course.
Otherwise we have variation gone wild. But, and here's the but, that is a part of the picture. I want to, like you said, I want to know about you. So therefore, I have to take my time in recruitment. Meet people, talk to people, speak with them, come into the office, come into school, whatever. So if you rush it because, oh my God, there's a head of maths free, quick, get him, or get her before they go, right? Because there aren't any head of maths around. You know, you're a school on the Isle of Wight, and where are you going to get someone from? There's only a finite population on the Isle of Wight. So when those outside pressures make it tough, you want to break out of the, oh, just forget about the benchmark, what you like. No, we need national benchmarks, otherwise society starts to fall apart again. GCSEs have their place, A-levels and BTECs have their place, they all have their place. But there has to be room within our cultural template which values young people who can string a sentence together. Young people who don't sort of, you know what I mean? Yeah, allow it, man. They can pick up the phone and have a conversation on your behalf and take an appointment or set an appointment, whatever it is. Young people who are confident, who back themselves.
Yeah, where is that nowadays into children?
Well, it's there, but in our culture, most people cross the road when they see a group of young people. They don't. We as teachers, we go to them, we teach them, we engage with them. Most people see a group of young people in the corner, they cross the road because there's fear. The cultural narrative around our young people is one of fear, yob, asbo, hoodie. And that's not so. The cultural template is wrong, but it's perpetuated by media and by the 5% out of the 100% that do things wrong. But for every young person in a gang, there's 1,000 not in a gang. But the 1,000 not in a gang don't make good headlines.
Absolutely.
Don't make good sound bites. But you as a recruiter, you as an employer, you as a head teacher, or whatever you do, you maintain an open, unbiased approach. Is that hard to do? Hell yeah. Oh, yeah. You've got to be trained to get rid of your biases and then retrained because your bias will come back again. Because you're right. You affiliate with people who look like you, sound like you, have been where you've been, like what you like.
Yeah.
And if you're like that, you're a mini me. Oh, I'll have you as my deputy head. Oh God. Can you imagine a school filled with me as the head, 2 mini me's and lots of assistant mini me's? Be a nightmare.
Yeah.
An absolute nightmare. But again, I'm asking a big thing to change the cultural template. That's huge. But I like doing huge. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
School by school, classroom by classroom, mat by mat. Let's do it.
Let's do it. I mean, that's again, like it all starts by having these conversations, doesn't it? It all starts from like people collaborating and starting to share views and opinions. And I think the big problem here in the profession in the UK in particular is where there is not enough. There are not enough head teachers that are listened to, and there are not enough head teachers that are heard. You know, and that's a big cultural problem. Like you said, I mean, it's a cultural thing. But if 2020 was ever going to be a positive, like from what the positive that we can take from 2020 is that this is a time to change. Like we should not be going back to the same education system that was prior to the lockdown. You know, before March 23rd, we had this education system that might have worked for about 50 to 100 years, fine. But the 21st century, the world has evolved. I mean, technology has evolved. The FTSE 100 companies, they want people that are innovative, that are going to challenge ideas, that are opinionated, that are going to come from diverse backgrounds. So why are we not encouraging that in schools? You know, let's find a niche. Let's encourage them to be really good at that. Why is he or she leaving the school thinking that they're not good enough at anything? You know, and that, like, even as an employer, like, cool, they might have all A's in their GCSEs, but if you grade them on progress and they've got like all C's or D's in terms of their interpersonal skills and their presentation skills, etc., etc. I mean, like that is probably going to be the reason why I don't take them on. But if somebody's got like 6s in their maths in their GCSEs, but they've got 9s for interpersonal skills, I mean, that's the kind of person I want to see in my company. You know, so maybe we need to think about kind of giving every kid a chance, because for too long we have given the opportunities to the academically advanced and not to those kids that are going to not necessarily be good at academics, and you know, like they leave school that just don't feeling that they're not good enough. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, because academically advanced young people are necessary, wanted, needed, and I celebrate them. It is about bringing on the everyone, you know, and it's about having an agenda and having a cultural template that allows everyone to be valued in their space. So I value you, young person going off to university and making your mark in the world. I value you and I support you and I salute you. I value you, young person who dreams of having their own hair salon. I support you, I salute you. I value you, young person who wants to, do whatever. It's about saying all these dreams, pathways, ways of being are valid.
Yeah.
But right now, at the moment, we value a certain set of skills, a certain outlook, a certain pathway. It is valuable, but it's not the only way.
Yeah.
It's not the only way.
50 years ago, there was only like a certain amount of jobs that were very high valued: accountancy, teachers, sort of doctors, like politics, right? But now the world has changed. I mean, there's so many different industries out there. So like just to kind of have the same focus we did 50 years ago is bonkers, in my opinion. We haven't moved with the times. So, I mean, I think, look, there's a lot of people out there that kind of want to focus on those interpersonal skills, those softer skills, even emotional intelligence. I think is so important, especially with mental health being such a big thing in the UK. So, I mean, overall, like just to kind of finish it off, I mean, what would you want to see by the end of this year? Even if it's the smallest amount of change, what would you like to see by the end of this year?
In our profession, what I want to see, I would want to see the continual embracing of technology and innovation. Mm-hmm. We have had to do things that we just didn't think were necessary, possible, worthy. You know, I don't remember schools teaching year 5 online by Zoom before lockdown. I don't remember schools even talking about that, you know. So I'd want to see that we don't lose the importance of technology and innovation in the way we deliver the curriculum. I'd want to see a continuation of curriculum change that we. I mean, there's a big thing about decolonizing the curriculum, not just so much decolonizing the curriculum, but embracing the variety and diversity of the curriculum as we should.
Yeah.
There's been a big catalyst this year in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement and the killing of George Floyd in the US, so that people began to think about that. It came onto people's radar. Good. It came onto our radar. I want to see it stay on the radar. Black people ain't going anywhere anytime soon, so there's no rush. You have to quickly decolonize your curriculum by September. But what you do, I'd ask you to embrace, is the conversation, and then the thinking, and the change, and the planning, and the action. I'd want to see schools celebrated for the heroic, nothing short of heroic,
absolutely,
effort since March, where head teachers have not stopped, school leaders have not stopped, where teachers broke up for the summer, broke up for Christmas, but head teachers carried on right the way through, were on call 24/7, some of them, to their detriment. I want to see them recognised by government and by communities, by societies, by parents, by the children, as heroes of this nation. I want to see teachers applauded and celebrated in the streets the same way we applaud those NHS workers who deserved their applause. I want to see reverence for the profession that holds society together. Don't want much, just want that.
I mean, in fairness, it's not much. I don't believe it's much. I think it's absolutely fair to kind of ask for the credit that you rightly deserve. And it's what initiated me to start this podcast, is to create awareness for what teachers are doing. And you have absolutely been heroes. I mean, Jesus Christ, you're risking your lives every single day to be in that front line. I mean, if this was back in 1914, we would be saying that you're the soldiers of this war, you know, because we're fighting an enemy, aren't we? We are. And you're risking your lives. Like, there's teachers that have been vulnerable, that have gone in because they have a moral obligation to these children. Absolute heroes, you know, and we don't give you guys enough credit for what you do.
Absolutely. So that's what I say to them as we wrap up. Teachers, leaders, admin workers, premises staff, TAs, whatever you do, whoever you are in schools, I salute you for your effort, and I thank you. I thank you. So where Gavin hasn't said thank you, Diana Osagie, she says it. Thank you.
Yeah, and TJ Jutler also says it. But yeah, guys, thank you so much. Thank you, Diana, for coming on. Everyone, thank you for watching. And hopefully this is going to be the year that we make a positive impact on education and the way that we kind of go about things here in the UK. But absolute pleasure speaking to you, Diana. You're way more than I expected you to be, which is an absolute compliment. You've been absolutely wonderful. So
thank you. Thank you.
Like I said, guys, thank you for watching. See you on next week's episode. Thank you.
Okay, thanks again. Bye-bye now.